panel. To my far left, we have Bea Walker, who is the Senior Requalification Caseworker from RefuAid. RefuAid really exists to support that transition to the UK market for people who have been forcibly displaced and have refugee status through requalification, financial support, and really navigating those first few steps to really translating their experience to the UK labour market. Delighted to have Bea as well, because we have just started collaborating on a new pilot to support by plugging in, again, our secret weapon, which is the people profession as mentors to individuals coming through the programme. So welcome, Bea. In the middle, we have Roxy Kaminska. I'm delighted that Roxy has made the journey from Bristol. Her train was only slightly delayed, because I know we were talking about trains earlier. And Roxy is an HR professional who has well over 4 years experience, coupled with a psychology degree, and is currently studying the CIPD level 5. Her experience was gained in Ukraine, and she is one of our bursary recipients. So more than anyone else, she will be able to give us a unique insight into what that transition to the UK has been like, some of the challenges, and hopefully some of the things that we can do in this room to make that even easier for other people coming through that route. So welcome, Roxy. And very close to me here, I have Russell Butcher from Starbucks, who is the Director of Strategic Programs and Partner Resources across the EMEA region within Starbucks. As well as that, Russell is a proponent, I think, of all things ED&I. He's focused on the inclusion programs within Starbucks, and particularly within hiring, so youth, apprenticeships, and more latterly the refugee hiring program, which we will probably focus on more in today's discussion, as well as supportive resources for partners across the Starbucks business in terms of mental health and well-being. And if you were lucky enough to come to the Festival of Work in June in Olympia, you would have seen Russell in conversation talking about some of the wonderful things that Starbucks is doing and some practical things that other employers can take from that. So I think you'll agree, a pretty stellar lineup of experts. So let's dive straight in. Bea, I wonder if I can come to you first, just to give us a bit of a scene set the context, and explain to us from your perspective working within RefuAid, what it's like for individuals having to make that forcible transition. You know, it's not choice often, and what the challenges are. Maybe help us bust some of those myths that exist as well. Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's great to speak to everyone. So to sort of set the scene then, the UN reports now that over 108 million people worldwide are now considered displaced. And obviously within that pool of people, a vast majority are professionals, healthcare professionals, engineers, accountants. I could go on forever. And I think what's really important and good to talk about is how we can support those people to re-enter their profession here in the UK, and what we can do to help, speaking to people like you, and how we can together hopefully work and support those people. So I think some of the myths, it might be good to talk about that first. I think one thing that's quite a common theme, which isn't necessarily helped by certain rhetorics in the media that we see, is that people with refugee status don't have rights to work, and that it will cost businesses a lot to maybe sponsor a visa. And that's just factually actually not true. So people that have been granted refugee status often have been in the UK for a long time, waiting for that decision, and they then have the same rights to work as a UK resident. So it's really important to make sure that when you are maybe reviewing applicants, that you're aware of actually the kind of laws and the legalities behind that, to ensure that you are promoting diversity and inclusion, and ensuring that your business kind of keeps up with the fair treatment. Another thing I think that's quite common, and again, it's really kind of pushed by a certain rhetoric and narrative, is that people with refugee status are sort of drained on resources. So that could be kind of nationally in the UK, public resources, but also in terms of when people are employed. And again, that's something that we try to kind of really speak to employers about, and aim to let them see that that's, again, not actually really the case. Like I said, there's professionals that have huge amounts of skills and experience that perhaps would actually offer things to businesses and your businesses that people who trained in the UK wouldn't. So a certain level of productivity maybe that's different, or creativity, ideas that might be new or innovative kind of to that particular business. And also there's been studies that show an enhance in conflict resolution, promoting cultural diversity, all things to consider. And actually going back to the drain on resources, again, the Migration Observatory, which is a great website that I'd really recommend people take a look, shows that actually people born and come to the UK as refugees are more likely to be in employment men than UK-born men, which is a really kind of interesting statistic. And another one that really stands out as well is actually that people from a displaced background are less likely to claim benefits than those born in the UK as well. And I think probably like me, I was quite stunned when I saw that, just because of what we're kind of told. It's actually not really the case. So just being kind of clued up and willing to have an open mind, I think, and look at people's transferable skills, talking to people, asking questions, that can be really important and help to bust some of the myths that you were speaking about.
Definitely. Yeah. And it's really interesting what you say, because a lot of that is the education piece, understanding what the reality is versus what we're fed. But also when you're working with employers initially who perhaps want to engage with this agenda, are those the kinds of questions you get asked? Is it about a reset and a context set in that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think quite often perhaps people are reluctant to ask those questions because maybe certain sort of stereotypes that surround it, but actually like we really welcome that. And I think working with NGOs, charities, organisations, and also people with a first-hand experience is a great way to really get a better understanding and learn more about actually what an asset people from a displaced background can be. And I mean, just facilitating those sort of open conversations, maybe thinking about running insight and sector days, which is something that RefuAid do. We work with different employment partners over the UK who run sector-specific days for our clients to attend, get a better understanding of the UK job market. So I think things like that, and just being willing to do that and to put the time in, actually the benefits that you then receive back to your business is quite astounding. And just kind of in a nutshell, once people have passed through our program, our requalification program that supports with getting people reaccredited, their starting salaries are 34,500 roughly. And out of about the 230 people that we've got back in work commensurate with their skills and experience, they're contributing about £1.4 million collectively in tax a year. So again, like, it just really goes to show, like, if you put the time in and you facilitate that, what is given back is so much more.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think you being here is really helping, because part of the work of the Trust and our partnerships with you and others is around doing that, changing policies, practices and perceptions. And that is key. Thank you. Roxy, I'm going to come to you next, if I may, if you feel comfortable sharing a little bit about your first-hand experience of having to make that transition from Ukraine to the UK and some of the challenges you encountered along the way.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here today. My name is Roxy. I'm from Ukraine. I moved to the UK last year because of the war in my country. Back in Ukraine, I was a people professional with almost 4 years of experience. As Leah mentioned, I worked mainly in tech companies and been doing, I would say, HR generalist tasks like recruitment, onboarding, people management, payroll, employer branding, basically anything. And I would say that my level was like junior to middle specialist back in Ukraine. So when I arrived here, obviously my first priority was to get a job within my specialization, like in human resources, people services. And I faced few challenges on my way to it. So the first one, I would say, I felt like, obviously that's my subjective feeling, but I felt like my experience from Ukraine wasn't really taken into account and wasn't really like meaningful for the market here. I was asked like almost all the time. I was asked question like, "Yeah, that's great, but did you work in the UK? Did you ever work abroad?" did you ever worked as an HR in the UK? And obviously, I didn't have any of that experience. The second challenge, I would say that due to uncertainty of the situation in Ukraine, employers they weren't sure if I'm gonna stay long term at the job. So I can understand that. It's totally understandable because you wanna hire people who's gonna stay for a longer time, but it was just didn't add me any advantages as a candidate, unfortunately. And a third one, and the last but not the least, it was the lack of CIPD qualification. Because back in Ukraine, we have a bit different emphasis on like candidates. For example, I would say when we interviewing people, we would look at the experience, relevant experience, and soft skills. And I would say education is at the bottom of it. It's like usually nice to have, but not like mandatory. And yeah, it's just how it goes in Ukraine. But in the UK, I've noticed that it's more of an experience plus education. So that what really matters, that what I was lacking of. So after a few months of a bit unsuccessful job hunt, I just decided like to take any office job just to get, things going. And I ended up doing risk and compliance in a law firm, which is a bit out of my specialty, but it was a good job. Can't complain. And this year I've decided to enroll in CIPD qualification. I reached out to CIPD Trust. And Ali, Leah's colleague from the CIPD Trust, she walked me through the process, and at the end, I received funding for studying CIPD Level 5, which I was really overwhelmed by the support of the CIPD Trust, by their help, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity. And at the end, months ago, I've got a job as a people professional. Now I'm working in onboarding, doing onboarding in financial services company. So I think at the end, like having that experience in the UK, like the fact that I literally worked in the UK and having, studying towards CIPD qualification. Really helped me to get a job, so I think it might be considered a success story.
Definitely a success story. I think what's interesting in that, and I didn't ask you to say how grateful you are. It's great that we could help you, but it's really interesting that although we were able to help with the CIPD Trust, actually the qualification itself was a barrier. So I think we have to acknowledge that and own that, and that is the purpose of the Trust, to find ways of tackling barriers that sometimes we forcibly create ourselves. And in this instance, thanks to Roxy and other counterparts, we're learning about what we can do to either part fund or fully fund qualifications to help that transition, I think as Bea mentioned earlier, but also we're trying to move also towards it, working out whether our experience assessment can support people translate their experience from other countries to the UK. So thank you to you and your experience. I know, and it's hard to have to go through those pain points, but it's helping us learn. And I think part of today is about educating ourselves about how we can tackle barriers by talking to people and getting that insight. So we will come back to you, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions for you as well, Roxy, but thank you for making the journey and telling us that. Russell, I'm going to come to you for that all-important sort of people leader, employer voice. And as someone who has been heavily involved in this agenda from the beginning, lots of people might not know this, but Starbucks have employed well over 1,000 refugees, and it's a staggering amount of individuals. But I think what's really interesting is lots of people quite glibly talk about this is a nice thing to do, it's the right thing to do, but also there are genuine business benefits. So could you walk us through, casting your mind back when you kick-started your program around the sort of opportunity agenda and refugee hiring program, what sort of did that, what challenges and considerations you had to take and consider, and then perhaps some of those business benefits that we talk about? Sorry, that's 3 and 1.
Yes,
I realise
questions,
I've gone in
yeah.
with like a triple whammy, but I felt it was worth
Okay,
it.
remind me of the questions again.
So the
I've got
kickstarting the
it,
program. Yeah.
Equally, thank you for the invitation today. I knew I was in trouble following you, Roxy, but thanks for sharing. So, I mean, going back to 2017, so actually our work was kicked off by our CEO and founder at the time. Like any area of inclusion, I guess. I mean, I can't emphasize enough the importance of getting leadership backing. So I feel very fortunate that we had our leader make a big, bold commitment back in 2017. And that commitment was that we were going to hire refugees globally at scale. I think if you go back to 2017, it was arguably the height of the refugee crisis, although you could probably say that's actually now, but it was certainly polarized with images from the channel and what have you. So I think we thought quite hard as a business about what's our role to play, what do we do, and I have to be honest, the biggest asset in our armory is our ability to hire at scale. We employ something like 250,000 across the globe. Here in Europe, Middle East and Africa, which the UK sits in as a region, we employ something like 60,000 in 42 different countries. So the biggest impact we can make is to provide opportunities and create new livelihoods. So there's an element of doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But there's actually a bigger element. I work in resourcing and HR. Sorry to hit my microphone. I work in resourcing and HR. So my motive really is around talent. And with refugees, I mean, we've been overwhelmed by the difference that they've brought, all the things that Bea's talked about, which I'm sure we'll go into more in a moment.
Yeah. And that's really interesting because I think that's one thing we haven't covered yet. We're in a skills type market in the UK. So you need to, as an employer, be looking at untapped pools of talent, of which this is one. And one of the things you talked about is obviously you can hire at scale. Were there any challenges and considerations that you had to think about as an employer? I know you had the leadership backing, but before you sort of embarked on this as a program, another stream of recruitment, rather.
Yeah, I mean, I think things have moved on a bit from when we were 2017. Like, there's guides and resources out there now around this particular agenda. Normally, with a strategy, we have a legacy of supporting other minority and marginalised groups, like veterans or opportunity youth, as we call it, globally. We have more of a runway to plan a strategy about how we're going to actually deliver this. With this particular initiative, we didn't. Howard Schultz just went out and wrote an email to all partners saying we're going to act and do this, and then it was up to us to. I mean, what he did is lit the blue touch paper, but it was up to us to get on. So it was hard to start off with to understand the agenda and who to turn to.
Yeah.
In terms of the work behind the scenes, I mean, we spent, if I think back, we did invest some time in around educating and awareness, particularly for our operators and store managers and recruiters. So actually, there's myths and misconceptions around refugees versus asylum seekers, and immigrants, and so we did a bit around like evidence and right to work checks and what have you. So we did a bit around that, linked to the sort of global commitment. We also worked with leading charities in the UK. So we work with the Refugee Council UK and Breaking Barriers, and the Scottish Refugee Council as our free primary, others too. But we took our time to work with those three organisations to really contextualise and build out a programme that will set us up for success in the future. So it took us a while to sort of mould and shape a programme that's given us the success that we've got today.
Yeah. And when we were last speaking back in June, I think one of the things you cited as a huge success, as any employer would, was the tenure and the retention levels that you were identifying with this particular demographic. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, so the model we have is not revolutionary. So many of you in the room will offer similar models for other pre-employment training programs. Like Bea said, despite the press rhetoric, there's not hundreds and hundreds of thousands of refugees on corners of the UK. They're a hard group to engage, and you need to work with experts. So we turn quite quickly to charities to get that expertise and support. Not everyone wants to work at Starbucks, not everybody's ready to work at Starbucks.
Sure.
The complexity of needs of a refugee, sometimes employment's not top of the tree and will peak up at a certain point in time. So what the Refugee Council, if I choose them as an example, did was help to select and find the right candidates for a pre-employment training course that's really contextualised to our business. So they put them through like a 3-week program, like an accelerator, where they'll teach them about our terms, conditions, our pay, customer service. They'll put them through some of our online training modules. At the end of the course, we go in and we guarantee interview. So we don't guarantee jobs, but we guarantee everybody in the course an interview. And that that model is very successful in terms of progressing folk into the business. Where we've piloted the other end of the scale, which is send us CVs and we'll try and match you to stores. It just wasn't successful for either side of the fence for a variety of obvious factors. In terms of the success, like Leah says, we've hired over 1,200 refugees in this region, a big chunk of which in the UK when we got going first. And because we've been going at this for a while now, stuttered a little bit during COVID, but because we've been going at this for a few years, we've got some really tangible metrics. So our in-works, our sustainability, around 70% of refugees that we've hired will sustain in work for a 12-month period. Now, for some of you, that might be that amazing, but if you work in retail and hospitality, trust me, that is like mega.
Yeah.
So that really helps to get investment from the business, to get sort of that process of osmosis, and organically just get the pickup from our operators. And if you top and tail that with the moment's sort of landscape around, actually really hard to find good talent. Refugees bring many, if not all, of the winning attributes we look for in an employee. So it's like a win-win, whichever you look at it.
Absolutely. And I think what you pulled out there was the importance of partnership. This doesn't have to be a scary process if you've not done it before. There are experts out there like RefuAid, like the Refugee Council, that you can seek out so that you can couple together your need with actually reaching individuals who want to work potentially for your business. I'm conscious of time and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. So while I just unlock the iPad, I know we have roving mics. So I just wondered if there were any in the room any questions anyone has, anyone brave enough to ask a question first of all. My colleague Sian has a microphone. Oh yeah, I think you might need to wait for the microphone, Georgia.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for the panel. My question is, I moved to this country by choice in 2012. At that time, I already had 2 degrees and work experience. And I was told the same thing that Roxy was told. And that really disheartened me. I was like, hopefully in 20 years we have moved on. But it feels like employers and recruiters are still saying, oh, if you haven't got work experience in the UK, everything that you've done anywhere else doesn't count. And this is like I worked in an international company whose official language was English even, not just like, so I'm like, how do we change that? Because I cannot believe that it's still the same.
Yeah, still
20
same.
years later. It's just a little bit sad.
It is sad. Let's explore that. Bea, can I come to you first, just thinking, because you're talking to a spread of different clients and hearing potentially some of that pushback.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something I think that you will share with people from a displaced background and other statuses. So it's a really common thing. And it's something, kind of the main thing really, that RefuAid try and help with. And it's educating, I think, is something that needs to be done. Employers that actually, for the majority of professionals, for them to be able to be in a position where they're able to apply for a job, the hoops and the steps they've had to do since arriving in the UK is vast. You know, a doctor's average requalification, we call it reaccreditation pathway, is about £6,000 in total. So it's not just like you come to the UK, you have your CV, you apply for jobs. Like you said, you have to do more qualifications, more reaccreditation, do exams. And maybe, you know, there might be a gap in somebody's CV, but actually the skills that they've got are UK based, as well as all of the skills that they've obtained in their home country. So actually it's, again, breaking it down and educating people that, you know, if you're hiring professionals and you see that somebody maybe has a gap in their CV or is from a displaced background, it doesn't mean that they haven't got the right skills and qualifications. And also really concentrating, I think, on transferable skills is really important. So somebody perhaps might not have got UK work experience, but actually what have they got that's more valuable than that? How can that be translated into your business and your kind of day to day? And actually what value can there be, you know, from that? And actually, I think what's really interesting is, like you were saying, Russell, the benefits, you know, the retention. I think there's been studies that show, you know, a crave for stability. So actually people maybe that have come from displaced backgrounds crave stability, hence why they are such an asset, I think, to workforces. So, you know, if we can get that word out there to people like yourselves and, you know, come speak to us, we can help. So yeah, that's what I would say to that.
Yeah. Would you add anything, Russell, from the employer perspective? Because it does sound like it's an education piece, it's an awareness raising piece. We've all got a part to play in that, but anything else?
I mean, from our perspective, we don't ask for experience or skills in some of our retail work. So we hire an attitude. So I guess it's just the circumstance or the scenario is not necessarily applicable to that extent. But I do see it. Like, it's very honest, it's been embarrassing at times that we've employed like lawyers, doctors, teachers, whatever it may be, like specifically trained people because they can't get a job elsewhere. But actually, we're okay with, we have quite a transient workforce anyway. We're actually okay with people being reskilled. At Starbucks, you can learn English really quickly on the job because you're interacting with customers every day. So we've got a really nice partnership going at the moment with the NHS and the Refugee Council, where it will take a bit of time to upskill and convert qualifications. But in the meantime, it's our win because we'll take somebody for 12, 18 months and we'll look after them and they'll get on and they'll improve English. And yes, they might leave to go into that, back into that occupational area. But so maybe there's more we can do collaboratively across businesses.
I love that.
Explore that.
That's a great idea. I love that idea that you see that as a win. You know, the departure is still a win because that person is progressing and moving on. It's quite refreshing. And from your perspective, Roxy, in response to George's question, obviously it was very frustrating at the time. You talked about that months where you weren't able to get those roles because you didn't have the UK experience and you had to take a job outside of your specialism. What else do you think would make it easier in that transition? Do you think it is a case of just telling employers that this pool of talent exists and trying to improve the way that they engage with them?
I would say just the easiest thing employers can do is just give refugees a chance and just invite them to the interview. And if you're unsure about their experience, I think you can just ask additional questions like, right, what did you do back in your home country? Just walk me through the process, and probably you realize that we did the same thing as you're doing here, as also from my experience while been working here for a year. It's not that different. We have the same, work attitude, the same processes, the same, maybe a bit different, like with the mentality difference. But I think that's going to be also a benefit, as we were talking, because we can bring, some new vision, new approach. I did that even in the law firm, in which I'm not really specialized in, but I just, mentioned to my manager, right, this doesn't make sense to me, like blah, blah, blah. Can we improve this process? So I had a bit of a different vision and it helped.
Yeah, I love that. I think everything you've just said is about making the process more human.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we're all guilty of it. You automate so much or make things less human. We had an employer who's based in Scotland, rural Scotland, who was keen to engage with the gender and recruited 2 refugees into her workforce. And she said what we did to make the process more human and not to turn off and not to rule people out because they didn't have UK experience was to offer a paid work trial, so that it was 2 sides coming together to understand what the business needs and to bring a fresh approach and understand someone's experience. Things like that feel like they could be slightly game changing. Any other questions in the room? I'm conscious of time, so we can take a few more before we round up with the panel. Don't be shy. Yes, we've got a question over here.
I feel like I'm hogging the mic quite a lot today, sorry. I'm just interested to understand a bit more about the Starbucks model and that side of things. So a couple of questions off the back of that. What was the kind of senior leaders' motivation for wanting to do this? Because I think there's something in that around tapping into those guys or that kind of level's personal passions, which for me, I'm getting a feeling that's what's driven some of this. So I'd like to understand a bit more about that. And then also you mentioned about Starbucks recruiting refugees and the embarrassment factor sometimes that they're taking on a role for which they're potentially overqualified, but not necessarily in the UK. Whether or not Starbucks are looking at extending that program to roles within the kind of more kind of corporate function side of things. It just resonated with me when you mentioned lawyers, just in a similar fashion to HR experts and consultants. The legal profession in the UK obviously has certain requirements, but any lawyer from any jurisdiction can be requalified as an English lawyer. So I just wondered if Starbucks were looking to perhaps expand on that and think about those people that they're bringing in at the bottom level, what opportunities are they then giving them internally to progress in roles that might be more suited to them?
Sure.
Thanks for the questions. So we are trying our best on, so I'll take the second part of the question first. So we have got partners who work in our head office that have come through this program. So colleagues in our procurement team, in our finance and accounting team. We can probably do more, but we've managed to find a way to get partners in, which is great. It's predominantly a retail focused program because that's where the volume is. We have like 400 people based in head office, but we'll continue to bridge a RefuAid. And then in stores, we now have baristas, supervisors, store managers. We've got store managers now hiring their own refugees, going through that sort of journey. So organically, over the years, we've created that progression model now. Love to do more in terms of people going to head office, but I think we've done some good stuff in that space. The founder commitment, I don't know actually. We have a history of doing this across a very gender item. So I guess and Starbucks has always set out to be a different kind of business and standing up for what it believes in. So we've made similar commitments around, not called NEET over in the US, but that kind of agenda, and there's high youth unemployment. We did a similar thing with veterans. So I just think that, that's typical Howard Schultz, that he will commit to something that he's passionate about and that he feels we need to act upon.
Yeah.
So pretty much I can say really in terms of the legacy, but I'm very pleased that he did.
Senior leadership buy-in, and it just resonates with me that, pick on something that means something to them, start there. And that's probably one of the big takeaways that I'll have from this. And I'm sorry if it sounded like I was being a negative Nelly about the scheme at Starbucks. I wasn't, but I was just interested to see how that could kind of evolve. So
he left the business some time ago as well. So it's really interesting, isn't it, that the leadership's carried on.
Yeah.
We've been purposeful. So I took out our president for EMEA to a refugee hiring course in London a few months back, and he was inspired and came up with big ideas, and like any president wants us to go bigger and do more. But so I guess we've continued to sort of get leadership buy-in, and we celebrate and we do case studies, and leadership buy-in is really important for us.
Yeah, and it continues, as you say, that awareness building. It can't just be at the start; it has to be woven through the business at regular touch points. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to ask each of the panelists just to give us a key takeaway from today. If you want any of the people professionals in this room to walk away remembering one thing, what would it be? I'll come to you first, Bea.
Yeah, I think the thing that would be great to take away is just like ask questions. We're going to be around. We run employability sector insight days we're always looking for new partners to do that with. That gives a chance for our clients to meet, work ready to meet with you guys and discuss maybe how you guys can work together and what benefits you can get from each other. So just approach us. And I think it's really interesting, like what Russell was just saying as well. Our end goal from what RefuAid do is to get people into work commensurate with their skills and experience. However, that's not always possible straight away. So when there are initiatives like that allow people to earn some money and get some experience whilst they're studying, that's great. And also I'm sure you have lots of people that, don't necessarily have a profession. So opening that up for them, being able to go up, in the ranks is great. So yeah, it's great to see how we can all work together. So please do come and chat because it would be great.
Love it. Roxy, any final thoughts from you?
I would say from my perspective, just for employers to be a bit more open, give refugees chance, immigrants chance. They can bring, I think, a lot of value to the team, to the organization, invite them to the interviews. I think that's the easiest thing employers can do. Yeah.
And ask those questions. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And Russell?
Similar thing, just to cheat really, but first is the door's open, so we're very open to collaborating with other businesses. So yeah, we're happy to share what we've been doing, but conversely, love to learn of others on this agenda or others too. I guess parting comments would be to give it a go and pilot and start small, and I don't think you'll be disappointed.
No. I think what's coming out clear from here, and this is very much the CIPD Trust model, is partnership and collaboration. We've got a real opportunity. I think we sit within an organisation that has 160,000 members globally. There's more we can do to do just that. I think that sharing of stories to really encourage other employers to get involved, to learn from each other, that's something we've got within our gift to do within the CIPD Trust and the CIPD mainstream. So hopefully more platforms like this will continue. You hear more from our fabulous speakers who've got real insight. And also, I think what's been great about the panel, been willing to be vulnerable on stage. You know, it's not always a utopian case study. If this works well and it worked brilliantly and we had no hitches whatsoever, it's about really giving a platform to talk about some of those challenging bits as well. So I'm conscious we're right on time. Look at that. Didn't even need the countdown clock. It's 2:39. I just want to say a huge thanks to our experts, to Bea, to Roxy, to Russell for battling the trains to get here with the little fluttering of snow we had this morning, but also for a very insightful discussion. So thank you all. Thank you. Brilliant.